This is Real Talk, the customer insights show with Jenn Vogel, a top-rated live stream and podcast in the market research and insights industry. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen on all major podcast channels. Join Jenn and her guests for a weekly discussion around topics that will help you understand your customers better. Real Talk is presented to you by VoxPopMe, the leader in video research and ranked number 1 in qualitative research by Grit 2 years running. Here's today's conversation.
Hello, insights professionals, marketers, and everyone who wants to understand their customers better. I'm Jenn Vogel, and today I want to talk about how to manage your company's reputation and how to know what a brand reputation even is. I'm joined today by Rachel Heseltine, Vice President of Consumer Growth at Trader Interactive, to dive into the subject. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited to get into this topic. Let's kind of start from the beginning. When we talk about brand reputation management, what does that mean and what does it entail?
Yeah, so basically, your brand's reputation is what people think about your brand. It's how you're seen within the industry. It's how you're seen by your customers. I'll throw out a quote. The only quote I'm going to throw out is the one by Warren Buffett, which is that it takes 20 years to build a reputation, but it takes 5 minutes to ruin it. And I'm actually going to say that was probably true back when he said it. These days, that 5 minutes can actually be a little bit shorter. We have a little bit more immediacy because there is that prevalence of social media. We do have that people piling in on things when things do tend to go wrong. And companies, there are just so many ways that they can have their brand impacted in a negative manner.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really critical too, about how social media has kind of sped that up a bit. You made me think of when I was in college and I was in my marketing 101 course, my professor told us that, when you have a good experience with a brand, you tell 3 people. When you have a bad experience with a brand, you tell 11 people, right? And so, just this idea that when something goes wrong, you're super quick to share about it, but we're not necessarily always shouting about the good experiences unless they're really, really good. And I think there's some parallels with reputation there of you're not necessarily, you're not necessarily talking as much about the good as we are when we're just lighting people up for the bad.
Oh, we absolutely. We just had that conversation this morning in the office about how people are much more willing to complain about a bad situation, to just get very upset about things, something that's irked them, something that's made them disgruntled. Whereas if they've had that really good experience, maybe they'll drop a note, maybe they'll talk to somebody. More likely than not, they won't. In which case, you're going to get more folks that are going to complain than are going to give you that positive feedback.
Yeah, for sure. And social media really does amplify that. We're very happy to, post a bad experience, right, on social media. But I had a very good experience recently with a brand I had no experience with prior, and I did tell 1 or 2 people about it, but I wasn't, I wasn't making TikToks, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And, it kind of seems like common sense potentially, but what are some of the things that can negatively impact a brand's reputation?
Lack of common sense would be the first one. So you have a lot of folks that they'll go out there and they'll do something that's just so plain stupid, and you'll wonder, why the heck did they do that in the first place? Did they not pass that by other folks on the marketing team, other folks within the company? There are so many examples out there, and I'm going to try not to name and shame companies, but there was a pen company that decided that for International Women's Day, this is a few years ago now, they were going to release a pen just designed for women, and you know exactly what that means. It was a pink pen. And the fact that they thought this was going to be an uplifting thing for International Women's Day was just head in hands. And there are just so many examples of those out there. And it's not just the brands themselves doing these kind of things, it's the individual employees. So you have individual employees that go out there, they just do stupid things. And whether that's just something as simple as going out on Twitter and tweeting, "I hate my job." If you go out to Twitter at any time and just search for "I hate my job," you will find lots and lots of folks that are tweeting that out. And these are folks whose real names will be in there. These are folks who will sometimes tweet about their actual company. And if you're thinking about, doing some work with that company, and you see that the people there are tweeting about how much they hate their job there, that's not a good thing, especially if you're trying to recruit, or if if you're looking to see whether you want to work for that company and you see other employees that are tweeting, "I hate my job here." That's going to make you think again about, do I want to work for this company? And sometimes it can be, not the current things that they're tweeting or putting out on LinkedIn or other open social networks. It can be things that they did years ago. So, folks need to think about all that past as well. What have they said that could be deemed to be critical? Of course, you get other things like, you have employees that have legal issues that fall afoul of the law. Is that something that is going to negatively come back to your brand? And that can happen when that person hasn't worked for your firm for, a couple of years, but they've still got you listed on their LinkedIn, or, they're still in the public mindset associated with your company. Having an inappropriate brand voice is another thing that can impact your reputation. I mean, think about how you want to be out there. You should have your brand voice set. You should know what that voice and tone is. Everybody who is out there on social and talking as part of your brand should be doing so according to that brand and voice. You don't want to, if you're a funeral home, you don't want to have folks putting out funny memes. That's probably not very appropriate. You get folks who try to be clever. A company thinks they're going to be clever about something, and it just absolutely fails because they didn't read the audience. They didn't know what's going to resonate with folks. I mean, there's just so many. I mean, again, common sense. There was a Krispy Kreme in England who decided they were going to have a Krispy Kreme Kids Club. So they went with Krispy Kreme Kids. KKK. And nobody thought about it. Nobody looked at that and said, "Oh, wait a minute, that's going to be a problem."
I'm horrified by that story. Like, I don't mean to laugh because it's not funny, but it's just so embarrassing. Like, who thought that was a good idea?
Well, they put the posters up, they put the signs, and again, it was in the UK, so the KKK is not necessarily something that in the UK they would think about, but it's something that we know about growing up. So there's not that much of an excuse for it. And again, that's not a corporate thing for Krispy Kreme, because that's probably an individual franchisee, but still, it's their name, so it reflects on them. I got lots of these. There's things like automated responses. So if you have folks on Twitter complaining about the service, whether rightly or wrongly, that they've received from your brand, or about the product from your brand, and you have an automated response bot that says, "Thanks for tweeting to us," that's not going to help the situation. That's just going to exacerbate things. Again, the whole being out of touch with customers. There was an auto company who, again, I don't know how this got through, but they were trying to highlight that they had low emissions from the exhaust of their cars, this new model they put out there. So they figured that the best way to tell everybody how low the emissions were was to put an ad together that involved a gentleman going into his garage, putting a hose pipe from the tailpipe into his car and turning it on, then realizing after a couple of minutes, oh, I'm okay because the car has low emission. Somebody thought that was a great idea.
Oh my gosh.
And I get so many examples. Piggybacking on unrelated events.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Patriot Day, 9/11 is a solemn day. You know, it's a day of remembrance. It's not a day for you to shill your handbags.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a day for you to go out there and you know, do a 25% off Patriot sale on your, you know, your food mixers.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to read what the audience is, and just again, other arrogance on the internet. Brands who think they control the internet. You know, they tell folks, we don't want you reviewing us if it's a bad review. There are several wedding venues, reception halls that have come to light that have had as part of their policies for the bride and groom, if any of your guests post a negative review, it's a $250 charge per review.
Oh my gosh.
And what happens? Of course, these come out. You know,
Yeah.
I see them, other people see them. They get written about on site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they just continue and continue. And then we do get to other things like bad reviews. You know, obviously you have customers that everyone goes out, they go to Yelp, they go to Google Reviews, they go to Indeed, they go to Glassdoor. These are all places that your brand can be impacted. And all of this online stuff absolutely impacts your offline because everything's so closely intertwined these days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you're not out there responding to reviews and talking to the customers, then that's going to hit you as well. And the two more, and then I'll let you go with the next question. But as I said, there are just so many ways it can be impacted. Companies not innovating. That is a brand hit because you can be seen to be a staid company that is just slowly losing its edge, and that impacts your brand. You know, do prospective employees want to come work for that brand, or are they going to go work? You know, want to work for a sexier brand that's doing newer things, that's pushing more towards the forefront?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those other things as well that are outside your control. So if there's something like an erroneous story about your company, there's nothing that you've done, nothing your employees have done. I'll give you an example of this. A tech website I worked with put out a story erroneously saying that Apple, one of their iPhones, was going to be delayed for 4 months. Apple lost 3% of their market share that day, of their stock value. They lost $4 billion that day. Now they've made it back since and more, but you know, just one story impacted them like that. I mean, there's so many ways. I think.
Yeah. I hear them, and I'm glad to hear that Apple recovered. But you know, as you were talking, and you sort of started to answer this question for me a little bit before I asked it. But you know, a lot of the examples that you share, it sounds like people are not even trying, right? They're just actively doing the wrong thing, or you know, not considering their tone of voice, or not reading the audience, or you know, just behaving badly, treating their employees badly, whatever. But there are a lot of brands out there that are trying to do their best, right? And like, what are some of the ways that their reputation is impacted negatively, that, you know, some pitfalls they might not be thinking of to avoid? But as you mentioned, some of those erroneous stories that you kind of can't control, or, you know, a lack of innovation actually you can control, right? Like how focused you are on building something new and listening to customers. And I want to get into, you mentioned this a few times, read the audience. That is like, seems like the key. But are there any other ways that like brands that really are trying to do it the right way might want to, like, any watch outs for those companies?
So I think a lot of it is, you need to have some preparation in place.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's preparation for when things go wrong, or whether it's just preparation to be part of the conversations. So, I mean, you want to be, in the places where your customers are.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to, if you have a reputation issue, the first time your customers let's say it's in a Facebook group that is all about your industry, or even all about your brand. And you don't want the first time that your brand responds to that group to be when there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not going to be seen as you having built up any kind of trust or empathy with that group. Whereas if you've actually been involved with them and you've been responding to other things, then they can see you as as a company that actually does want to listen and does want to care. Because it's this whole, back in the old days, when you were talking to your customers, it was one to many. You were out there and you were just pushing what you wanted for marketing out to the audience. Now it's many to many. Your customers are all talking to each other. They're talking about you. They're talking with you. If you're not there, they're going to be talking about you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be where they are. But yeah, I mean, the other items of preparation, you want to know who your audience is. You want to know what they're interested in, what motivates them,
Mm-hmm.
Especially around your brand. You want to know those areas that they are talking. If folks are out there on Indeed talking about you, if they're out there on Glassdoor, your employees, make sure you're looking at that. If they're out there in Yelp, make sure you've actually got your Yelp account and that you're responding to those reviews out there. Make sure, again, you've got your brand voice document set up, all your brand guidelines set, so your employees know what and when things should be said. Have an escalation policy in place for if things don't go right. So you can, your employees know how to move things up. Also think about if there is, like, let's go with, if it's a disgruntled customer, they've posted something on Twitter or Facebook and you've seen this, you can ping them and say, hey, follow me and I'll DM you. Give them your personal phone number or your work phone number and have that conversation offline. You don't have to have the entire conversation online. And then you can kind of resolve that and then come back to where you were and, post that resolution for the folks to see. So there's lots of different ways that you can become engaged. But you need to, you don't want to be panicking when you do have that brand hit.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have a plan in place.
That's such a great suggestion, and just kind of like being part of the conversation in an ongoing way, so that you can prepare for when things maybe go a bit sideways and you weren't really planning it. And then I guess just to take a step back, like, what steps should companies be taking to understand where their brand reputation sits currently?
Well, I mean, there's a few different ways you can go. I mean, you do just simple CSAT surveys. Find out if your customers are satisfied with you. Have customer councils if you're working with larger customers. If you're working with the general public, I mean, just simple surveys on your website. Find out what people think about you. Find out what the problems are. Look at the comments that are coming in on your social sites. Do some sentiment analysis on those. See if there is like an overwhelming positivity or negativity about your brand. There are lots of ways to, again, if you know where your customers are, you can find out from them and let them tell you how they feel about you. Or you could even do Google surveys and have them out on YouTube do a pre-roll survey where it pops up and asks which brands have you heard of and how do you feel about these brands, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there are so many different methods now that we can reach out to. Like you said, if it's your customer, you've got CSAT programs, most likely. If they're not your customer and you just want to understand the general, reputation of your brand outside of people who currently buy from you. There's a lot of ways to find those people. I think the hard part is taking all that data and putting it together and measuring it consistently over time, so you can see those swings up and down, right? Because some of the methodologies that you mentioned, let's say you are doing CSAT, you are doing a Google survey, and you are doing sentiment scoring on social media, how is that all triangulated together and, put in a consistent way that can be measured over time? So you could say, uh-oh, we're having a bit of a dip, or, oh, look, something's happening in a positive direction. What can we link that to? It's actually quite hard to bring all that data together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to, for one, allow the actual time to study that data. And then two, have the actual follow through on that data once you actually understand what is being said there and what you can change and what you can't change.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. What are some examples of things that you can change and things that maybe you can't?
Well, again, it comes back to if you're listening to what the common problems are that folks are. So if you have those commonalities and you see that folks are having a particular problem with, let's say it's your purchase process, how can you then change that purchase process? Look at how, if you look at how folks are falling out of your sales funnel, why are they falling out of there? What is upsetting them? What is not working for them? So you can kind of resolve based on what folks are seeing, or if there's functionality that your site doesn't have. We've had in the past customers reach out to us and say, "Hey, it'd be great if we could do this on your site." And we look at it and say, "Actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's do that." And we implement that for them. And it's always great when we get something like that, because we have great ideas. I'm sure we have some not great ideas too. But if we can get customers to give us that kind of feedback where we can know what's worthwhile putting the LOE in to get that developed and get that live, or if it's some change to a product to get that product changed, just listening and seeing what works. I mean, you can also do your actual pulling customers into a room and actually doing those individual customer chats to kind of find out from them how they feel. Or as I said, we have dealer councils because we work with dealers across our different sites, RV dealers, motorcycle dealers, and so forth. So we have a council where we pass ideas by them and see what they think as representatives of the industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is such a great kind of segue. This is going to be my next question: is that what role does the customer play in, actually talking to them in improving reputation, right? And what are some of the different ways that we talk to them? So you've already started to say, I love this idea of a dealer council. We have an advisory board ourselves, having, kind of a very diverse group of individuals from different industries, from different types of roles that can kind of share the challenges that they're going through in their role, give ideas. I think that balance of what the customer wants and what we want to offer, there's a sweet spot in there with some really interesting ideas, like you said. So hearing from somebody, oh, actually, that'd be a great idea, we should put that on their website. What are some other ways that bringing the customer into the conversation is really valuable?
Yeah, well, I mean, so again, we do those dealer councils, we do those conversations with customers, we do, we have a user testing program where we can actually have folks run through our website. We can see them as they're running through the website and get their feedback, so that we can identify, where folks are having problems. Because, we know how our website works. We know what it should do and how it should be used. But the users don't necessarily use it the same way. So different things like that. And again, if you're going out to, those review sites, and you can respond to folks out there and maybe have those conversations and pull them in. I forget the exact numbers now, but there was a study that was done a few years ago now that talked about the fact that if you actually turn somebody who is disgruntled with you into an advocate, they actually become stronger advocates for your brand and will actually buy more products than if they were already happy with your brand, because you've been able to show to them that you cared about them, and that you cared about their views and their opinions, and wanted to turn them around.
I can totally see that. Yeah. And our own approach to things like that, like you mentioned CSAT, we have an NPS program.
Yeah.
When we get really high NPS scores, there's a specific follow-up that happens with those promoters, the 9s and the 10s, right? If you get a detractor in the NPS, like our team has a different approach, right? To what do we go back to those customers with to ensure that we really hear their challenges and come up with a solution that's going to help them, continue to find value. And I can totally see what you're saying, that turnaround is actually can be more powerful than the customer who just came in, loved you, has always loved you. They're an advocate. Like, we want all of those, trust me. Like, and we love all of our customers that are advocates for us, but being able to turn something around and have somebody who was struggling find new value or solve a problem for them that they were having is even more powerful, for sure.
Yeah, and we don't just do that externally. We do that internally as well. So we actually have an anonymous feedback system for all of our employees. So they can give that anonymous feedback about what's working for them, what isn't working for them. And, that's one of the ways that we're looking at, how we can improve morale within the company, make sure that folks are feeling better about things, identify any kind of problems that we want to solve, and kind of get a grasp on the sentiment across the company. But that's also going to help us with, Glassdoor and Indeed reviews, because those are the folks, our actual employees, who should be the ones that we're posting over in those sites. So if we make them feel good and happy, which they should be about working for us, then that's going to help us to be able to attract new employees as we grow and continue to grow.
Sure. And also, I would imagine, giving people a format to provide anonymous negative feedback internally maybe prevents them from writing, "I hate my job" on Twitter, which is ultimately what you're trying to avoid, right?
Absolutely.
Now, we're going to shift gears just for a second and talk a little bit about getting feedback from your customers with product taste testing. That's what Vox Pop Me's VP of Research, Brian Monchine, discusses in today's segment of Bright Ideas. Let's check it out.
So I've talked in the past about what a good research plan can look like when you're preparing to launch a new product. Today, I figured we would talk a bit deeper about one of those research components that typically comes later on in the product research plan, the taste test. Now, I could just talk you through the components for the test, but why not actually administer a taste test in real time so you can see the reaction from a respondent's point of view? With that, I'd like to introduce you to Otis. Say hi, Otis. So Otis will be playing the part of our respondent, in which he'll be evaluating a new line of crackers that we're looking to launch in market this summer. So the way we typically do this is sometimes have our respondents read a short concept before they get into the tasting. But Otis can't read because he's a dog. So we'll just move right into the taste testing. Okay, Otis? Okay, so you can go ahead and try the first cracker, Otis. All right. So Otis, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 means definitely would buy and 1 means definitely would not buy, how likely would you be to purchase this product? A 5. All right, he likes it. And how unique would you say this product is from similar products currently available? 5 meaning extremely unique, 1 means not unique at all. Looks like he's got to think about this. Oh, he might be going to try to get more crackers. He gives it a 5. All right. Why don't you go ahead and have one more cracker, Otis? All right, good. So we just have one more cracker, Otis. All right, so we just have one more question for you. All right, Otis. So how likely would you be to recommend this product to a friend or family member, or in your case, another dog? 10 means extremely likely, and 1 means not likely at all. A 10. All right. That was great. Thank you so much, Otis, for taking the time today to try our new products. Best of luck in your new product research testing.
Oh my gosh. That's Brian, our VP of Research. Thank you for bringing Otis onto the show today. Obviously, we're not talking on this episode about food products or taste tests or anything like that, but some good tips in there, certainly on how to keep your dog occupied. All right, let's get back into the conversation. Let's say you're doing all this measurement. You've got some kind of major event that happens, or maybe just a dip over time. Let's say over the course of 6 months, your brand reputation is really tanking and maybe you're not sure why. What are some steps that companies can take to start to improve the reputation scores?
Well, I'm going to give the SEO answer, which is it depends. It's going to depend on what the issue is. And again, you've got to figure out what that is. And if it's multiple issues, you also have to figure out if that issue is a legitimate issue, or if it's something that is erroneous or a misperception. Once you've figured that out, then you need to figure out, okay, what are the steps to correct that? And is it something that needs to change directly within your company, or is it something that needs to change with the product? Is it something that needs to be communicated in a different way to your audience? So really, it is going to depend on a lot of different factors, and you need to be flexible. You need to have that understanding as to if you're listening to what's being said, what should you do? And then when you do that, you should do that openly, honestly, transparently. If it is a widespread issue, then make sure that you have a communication plan in place so that you can express to folks that, yeah, we saw this, we recognized it, we've worked on it, we've identified the issues, we fixed them, or here are our steps to fix these issues, and get out ahead of that so that you can correct any kind of perception about your company. If it's a misperception, like, for example, we go back to that article about Apple that dropped their stock price. Apple had a press release out within a couple of hours that said, hey, that's not true. We're still on schedule for everything to launch in June. I mean, their stock price had still dropped at that point, but they were able to very quickly get on top of that. And by the time the stock market opened the next day, they started going back up again. So basically, it's listen, have plans in place, be open, be honest, be transparent. You don't have to show the whole how the sausage is made, but be prepared to show some of your workings and what the outcome is.
Mm-hmm. I like that transparency. And, I think there is something, maybe a little underestimated about brands just being human. And it seems like in this sort of scenario, especially if something isn't quite going right, the brands that handle it really well are the ones that go, our bad. We screwed that up. Maybe we were out of touch, or, whatever the case may be, right? Like, those are the ones that bounce back more quickly than the ones who kind of dig in and, have the corporate response, the legal response, as opposed to the human response, and are able to actually do something different. What's interesting to me, as you mentioned, like, figure out what the issue is first, and then, is it a legitimate issue? If it's not a legitimate issue, gosh, that's got to be the hardest one to try to combat. Because if you've got something that you can fix, then you can fix it. But otherwise, there are some things that you mentioned that are out of your control. And I was talking to a friend the other day who used to work for a company that had a major PR crisis when their spokesperson was arrested. And we were talking about, like, how long did the brand reputation suffer as a result of that, and something out of the company's control. Like, it was, like you mentioned, it was the behavior of an individual who happened to be the spokesperson for the brand. And, just hearing how they handled it, it's, that the stuff that's out of your control has got to be the hardest to come back from.
Yeah, I mean, one place I worked at, we started suddenly getting feedback that one of our employees had posted some racist stuff on Facebook.
Mm.
We went and looked, and they hadn't worked for us. Actually, they had worked for a company we'd bought. They'd left that company 6 months before we bought that company. So they'd never been an employee of ours. They'd never worked with us. But because they had our brand on their Facebook account still as where they worked, because who knows, maybe they hadn't been able to find a job since then. We were the ones that got hit, and our response was exactly that. We were straightforward, we were factual, and it got cut off right away because we had no impact on that. There was nothing to do with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's tricky. Some of these, corporate crisis teams, man, I give you guys a lot of credit for dealing with this stuff on a regular basis. Now, what are some of the ways that, like, how can you tell that your brand reputation has had some kind of shift? What are some of the ways you identify those changes?
Well, firstly, baseline it. I mean, if you don't know where you're starting from, you don't know where you're going. You don't know if you're in a bad situation. I mean, that's the same with any KPI. You want to make sure that you're baselining and then regularly monitoring. And whether that is that you have some, reputation monitoring software in place that's looking in all the usual places, whether it's making sure that your social team actually looks at what's posted on your social accounts, and that doesn't necessarily have to be 24/7, because let those folks sleep at some point. But if you're a company that, like for example, British Airways, a few years ago, there was a customer who his dad lost his bags, and they were stuck. So they tweeted at British Airways, and the British Airways account says, this account is monitored from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. That's not when planes fly. Planes fly all the time. So this poor guy, his dad was stuck and had no clue what to do, where to go, how to get his luggage, where his luggage was, which country it was in. So he actually, this is right when sponsored tweets came out. He started buying sponsored tweets about British Airways, about how they'd lost his dad's luggage.
Wow.
People will get creative. I mean,
yeah,
people will buy a domain to attack your site. Yourcompanysucks.com, which is why also you should be proactive and buy some of the more obvious ones, but you're never going to get them all.
That's such a great tip. We're gonna have to. I'm gonna call somebody right after we get off this call. We got to buy voxpopmesucks.com just in case. But what you're saying is so true. Like, we say this a lot. If you don't give customers a way to speak to you, they're gonna find another way. If you don't give them a venue to give you feedback honestly, or if you're not responsive to their needs or to their challenges, like, everyone is a content creator right now. Everyone is a publisher. You don't have to get a news article picked up by the press for everyone to find out about it. And even you started out this episode talking about that Warren Buffett quote of, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. I mean, both of those numbers are probably faster now. That guy buying sponsored tweets against British Airways, he's just built himself a reputation in a day, and really potentially could, like, just from the brand not being accessible, really cause some major problems, because we all have huge audiences, whereas not that long ago, 15, 20 years ago, our audience was just whoever we knew. Now we get to talk to people we don't know all the time. And it's very easy for that viral message to really damage a brand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it only takes one tweet as you're climbing onto an airplane for you to land, 5 hours later and find out that it's gone around the world and you were fired 4 hours ago.
Yep. Yeah, nobody wants that. So listen to your customers. Let's, give people a voice to give feedback. And, I love what you said, be part of the conversation when things are going well so that you can respond when something happens that, in an authentic way. So powerful. And I know so many brands and companies out there, some are really doing it wrong. Some are really trying to do it right. And that has an impact on the success of the business and the revenue. And, that's what they're all there for ultimately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. This has been a really great conversation. One day we'll have to have a cup of coffee and go through all the other examples that you didn't get to share today. But thank you so much for your time and for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening in. We will be back with another episode next week when I will be joined by Crystal Carter of Wix. See you then.